Welcome to Rethink Gaming's Think, Rethink, Play podcast with Bob McDowell and Jerry Perkle.
And today's topic is how to be an edgelord.
If you want to support this content, please consider joining us on Patreon. Subscribers get a special role on the Discord server, access to all of our content, and a chance for seats at our subscriber-only tables.
Yep. And thanks to all of our Patreon patrons. Today we released a new tier for sponsors only. So if you'd like to promote your stuff, let us know.
Yeah, come on down. We'd be glad to have you. So what are we actually talking about today, Jerry?
We're actually talking about edgelords this time.
Aha. Awesome. All right. Well, before we dive off into that, let's do some introductions.
Who are you?
Well, I'm Bob. I run 3 games for the Rethink Gaming crew right now, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I'm currently working on some review videos, doing podcasts, as you can tell, and other wonderful things. I love this job.
And I'm Jerry. I'm the house DM at RPG Dungeons in Carrollton, where I'm currently running a bi-monthly homebrew campaign set in the Forgotten Realms. And yeah, they're trying to rope me into more games, but I'm trying real hard not to do that. Also doing a how to play D&D session. So yeah, staying busy. On top of that, I write content mostly for DM's Guild, and I harass Bob every chance I get.
That's right. That's right. For your how to play D&D, you should bring actual 10-foot poles and pass them out. I think that'd be hilarious.
All right. Can I
Well,
fit a
so
10-foot pole in my Honda, actually? That's the real question.
you can tie it to the top. It'll fit fine. Um, so, as we dive off into the topic of edgelords, if you haven't heard of this before, everybody knows this character type, right? This is the guy brooding on the rooftops. He always works alone. He's got a tragic past. He doesn't really talk about it. Uh, have you seen these characters in the campaigns you've been in, Jerry?
Absolutely. So, I mean, you got it right. These are characters whose actions or their tough attitude make them seem edgy. It's not like necessarily, I guess, specific to D&D, right, or role playing, but something that you see a lot. Um, to me, I think it's everyone's second character is the edgy character, right?
Mm.
First one, you don't know what you're doing. Second one, you're definitely playing a rogue, and he wears all black. Um, so yeah, and they're trying to be cool by virtue of being tough, dark, or badass. So yeah, it could also be a warlock with a chip on their shoulder. This
Yeah.
character is very melodramatic, very cliche. Um, I like to think of, I mean, the good examples of this, right, are kind of like the '90s anti-hero in comic books, right? So
Hmm.
think Batman or the Punisher or even to some extent like Judge Dredd, right? They're
Right.
the the tough guys.
Right. The lone wolf, going against the rules, making their own way, right?
Exactly. Is it a bad thing though?
When done too much, it certainly is. If for no other reason than we wind up having to share the limelight in weird ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, like you said, it's everybody's second character, but I think players pretty quickly realize that it doesn't play that well in the collaborative game of D&D or similar.
Right. Lone wolves aren't good team players.
Right. And it is a team sport, as we've said time and time again.
Let's be careful calling it a sport. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. I think we painted a good picture here of kind of what that is. But kind of, in my opinion, is it a bad thing? It can be if you take it too seriously, right?
Hmm.
But if you take it lightly, and you're playing a light game, I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. Um,
Yeah,
especially
so
if you're kind of being
edgelords, they're frequently loaded with background, which is a good thing in and of itself, right? You need to have that sort of grounding for your character.
right.
Um, as long as you're willing to take the concept and develop it, like
Hmm.
if you look at Han Solo in A New Hope, right? This is the worst player character you could bring to a table as written. Like the guy takes the money and leaves. That would just kind of break your typical D&D game for that to happen. But it turns out he's got the heart of gold in the end, right? And he winds up
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sticking around and sticking with the party. If your edgelord can develop in that way, then it's probably just background more than a deeply rooted character concept.
Who's more the edge lord, Han Solo or Boba Fett?
Oh yeah, well yeah. Boba
Yeah,
Fett would
original.
also make a terrible
Yeah,
addition to a D&D party.
right. The original trilogy, of course. I think they developed them a little bit in the prequel, but you didn't, see that kind of later on or
Mhm.
earlier on, depending on how you're counting things. Yeah, kind of that's stereotypical edgelord, right? He's, got the gun, works alone. He's pretty quiet, you know.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's just, while he's a badass, it's not very cool. Um,
Right.
for like an entire group. It kind of also makes me think of I feel like in movies, right, this concept of the edgelord was like played out really badly in like the late 90s. Think the
Yes.
Matrix, right? The Matrix was pretty cool in its release. But if you go back and watch the movies, it's like, what's with all the leather? Like
Right.
I get
Yeah.
that people are into that, but
I mean, they can
that's a
look
little.
however they want, and they all look exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pale skin, glasses, you know. Yeah.
And I think the 90s definitely is probably the genesis for the concept as well, or at least when it really blossomed and started taking hold in people's thoughts. It's still around today, don't get me wrong. But
Hmm.
I think in the earliest versions of the game, it was not as common. At least I don't remember it. And I have to say, like, I don't have a really good backstory tale to tell for this because I grew up in the basic red box. Team play was kind of very essential to those kind of things, like party composition. That was a thing. You talked about who played which character, and everybody kind of had a reason to go along. There were only three alignments, so it was less complex by definition. But
Hmm.
in general, like you wouldn't make a lone wolf for a game like that. You'd get destroyed.
Yeah, and I think you know how I feel about party composition, right? Like I don't think the group should be allowed to discuss that beforehand.
Right.
Um, yeah, interesting. Yeah, it was the
Well, I
'90s.
did some digging, as I do.
Okay.
Um, I couldn't find, obviously the term edgelord listed here anywhere. That might be just a little too internet for
Hmm.
these materials, but the DMGR1, and which, by the way, this is a second edition supplement. It has a terrible title. It's called the Campaign Sourcebook and Catacomb Guide. It has almost nothing to do with campaigns and almost nothing to do with catacombs. There's actually a better book about building campaigns than this one. But this one is just chocked full of all the stuff that didn't make the DMG. It's kind of the DMG2, and I do actually have the third edition DMG2. Pull that out next. But um, this one is just a really, really, really great read. Pick it up. Also, if you ever hear people talk about trans inclusion in D&D, Paul, now Janelle Jaques, was a key author in this title, and she has had a very successful career in RPGs, even while transitioning during working on them. So I'm also kind of proud to own the book for that reason. But um, it talks about overdone independent action. First paragraph says successful adventuring parties survive and thrive because of teamwork, yet not every character feels that his best interests are served by continually going along with the group's actions. More often than not, these are the players whose characters are not the leader types. Their characters hang near the back while the party's movers and shakers plot the team's next action. Notes passed to and from the DM to these players describe actions to be performed secretly if possible. When the group goes one way, the independent PC goes the other. Sounds pretty familiar, right?
Yeah,
And it
absolutely.
it wraps it up with independent action can be fun for both the DM and the player willing to risk his character, but if it happens too frequently, it leads to the problem of a split group. In such cases, the DM is forced to run two or more separate groups at the same time. Still worse, it can lead to intra party treachery and player feuds.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, right? Never split the party. Rule
Yeah,
number one, right?
and really because the dungeon master is a solo role in almost every circumstance, and
Mm-hmm.
they only have so much time. So either you are part of the group that's working together to do things, or you get half of a dungeon master for the rest of the night. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Most people just don't look at it that way.
Yeah, interesting. And if you're running a group of 4 players, is it right for that one player to take half of a dungeon master?
Right. I mean, probably not. There can be times when it makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it should be pulled through, but the person who's doing it to be disruptive or to be special, um, they're taking away from the others in the group. And it's going to depend a lot on party dynamics. Like if you have a watcher or a wallflower in your group, maybe they don't care what happens in the game, right? Maybe they're just as happy to watch the Edgelord go off and, brood about his backstory than they would be to be involved themselves, right? Some people are just there for the game, just to be part of it.
Absolutely. What else do you
So,
have in those ancient tombs?
right, these tomes of knowledge. So the first one was from 1990. I don't know. Hopefully, some of our listeners were born past that point, but um, this one is DMG2 from the third edition. So we're talking, considerably more recent.
Uh-huh.
It talks about all the different player types, and it's really great resource for that. It talks about even how to handle different player types with different DM styles. It's wonderful in that way. It talks about the outlier more so than the edgelord. Again, it says the D&D game assumes a high degree of group cohesion in which a team is equipped with complementary talents, bands together to slay monsters, gather treasure, gain XP. Both the rules and the typical activities involved in adventuring reinforce group unity. Some players, though, get their emotional charge by subverting this dynamic. These players have the outlier trait. They revel in being different and playing by their own rules. In short, they love to play oddballs. This sign of kind of goes down the path of they make weird characters, maybe they don't fit in, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it talks about the risks of souring the mood and clowning around and those kind of things. It sums up by saying not all outlier PCs are comic loonies. A player who creates a scholarly non-combatant type in a battle-heavy campaign is also trying to tell you something by opting out of your game's standard activities. Others might find story or drama driven players who want you to facilitate their experimentation with hard to play PCs. So it kind of softens towards the end, talks about the risks and so forth. But it says, look, this could also be your players communicating to you about the kind of game they want you to run.
Sure. So maybe, you miss the signal in session 0, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's super important too that you bring up session zero because those were not common
Right.
until 2000s, mid 2000s or so.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I always had table rules, but not everybody did. And when I got onto the internet having these conversations with people, I was surprised to learn that it wasn't something that a lot of people sat down and talked about. Like I have seen these concepts come to my game. For whatever reason, they were most common in Star Wars. Like I'm going to make the bounty hunter. Maybe it's that Boba Fett thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would just say that is a cool idea for a character, but that character doesn't fit in with the group. Please come back with one that does, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and I still kind of say that to this day. If I've got a player and they're throwing just weird things at the wall to see what sticks, I'm like, that is really cool, um, but not for this
Yeah.
group, right?
Just no.
Well, I try to be supportive, but
Right. You're a
uh,
nicer man than me, Bob.
I try to treat people gently. I like to be treated gently myself. So, um, yeah. So the 4E DMG, um, right in the front, page 8 or so, starts playing into the same player types. It doesn't necessarily dig into the problem players in this context. So this one is not quite as applicable. If you look at the instigator, it says an instigator enjoys making things happen. She has no patience for careful planning or deliberation. She'll just open an obviously trapped chest just to see what happens. She provokes authority figures and opens dungeon doors to bring more monsters into an already difficult fight, etc., etc., etc. Um, that's not an exact match. It's probably the
Mhm.
closest one here. It
So
advises you.
what do they call
Sorry?
this player? Sorry. What do they call this player?
Instigator.
The
Instigator. It says an
instigator.
instigator likes to make things happen, takes crazy risks, and deliberately makes
Hmm.
bad choices, thrives
Hmm.
in combat and dislikes having nothing to do, takes decisive action when things grind to a halt. Um, yeah, it's kind of the closest one.
Hmm.
Basically, it advises you to include objects and encounters that invite experimentation, let her actions put the characters in a tight spot but not kill them all, include encounters with non player characters who are as feisty as she is. And then it says, be sure that the instigator doesn't get the rest of the group killed or attack the other PCs or their allies. That last one I think is super key, and as well as the don't let them get everybody killed, right? Individual choice should have a limit. We talked about this a little bit with agency a couple nights
Right.
ago.
Yeah. Hmm. I'm. This is interesting. I feel like this one's the most off so far. I see the overlap for sure, but yeah, I think I'm a little bit guilty of this one. To be completely honest with you. And there's a time and a place for it, though, right? To be that instigator. At the end of kind of what you read, it's like the right time to do that, right? Like nothing's
Mhm.
happening, get the ball rolling, right? I've been there where you don't have a DM who will gently nudge the story forward, right? And so you just have to do something, right?
Right.
To get that ball rolling. So yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So a little bit forward into the future, we're talking all the way up to 2013. Oh, it's only 7 years old, super recent.
Hmm.
But I'm looking at Monty Cook's work here in Numenera, um, and it's really only tangentially related. But it says another big part of handling players is coping with disruptive players. Disruptive
Hmm.
players can be the death of a game. They can hog all the attention, tell the other players what to do, or challenge your rulings at every turn. A lot of GMs are tempted to deal with such players during the game by punishing them or giving them negative feedback. For example, they have the character get attacked more often, lose experience points, or suffer similar consequences. Resist this
Hmm.
temptation. Instead, speak with the player person to person, not GM to player, outside of the game, and explain that his behavior is causing problems. Be clear, direct, and firm, but also friendly. The bottom line, however, is don't play games with jerks. One disruptive, rude, or offensive player can ruin the whole group's fun. That, I think, is the best advice in any of these books tonight. So I'm not saying don't play with edgelords, right? I'm saying don't play with disruptive players who are being a jerk.
Sure.
Wholly endorse that.
All right. So to kind of like summarize, I guess those four books here. I was taking notes on DMGR1. Uh, Overdone independent actions, right? So don't
Mm-hmm.
let someone steal the spotlight. Um, the DMG2 from 3 was the oddball character who the player that makes that character that's just there to cause problems, right, and run fun for the entire group.
Mm-hmm.
You had the instigator from the 4E DMG, which I'm not prepared to call that a problem because it probably hits too close to home, and I'm not at the point right now where I can admit fault. And then New Merit, which I didn't know you own. I kind of want that book, but yeah, don't play with jerks.
Yeah.
Very sound advice.
Yeah, it really
All
is.
right.
So, yeah, are you being an edgelord because it's kitschy and cool and just kind of a vibe, or are you being an edgelord because you want to dominate the game and
Mhm.
go and tell your story and you could care less whether the other 4 or 5 people are there?
Okay. Very good. And more good advice from Monty Cook there. More than just don't play with jerks. Is don't be that adversarial DM.
Right.
I think the story that I shared last episode was related to this, right? Or maybe it was the first episode. We've done so many episodes, I can't keep them um,
You're talking about
separated in
the
my mind.
giants and the unwinnable fight, right?
Right, right. So, I mean, transporting myself back to uh, preteen Jerry here, right? Was that DM adversarial in reaction to our shenanigans? Uh, Probably yes, right? Like looking back at that, it could have been all of our fault. If I
Hmm.
remember correctly, it was far too many people for an inexperienced DM to handle, right?
Right.
Like if you're new to DMing, like 4 or 5 people should be probably your limit, and that should be the probably the top limit in my opinion. I know you probably disagree with that because you run games with like 8 players online.
Well,
Um,
the software helps for sure.
right, right, right. With your automation there, but yeah, another very good, interesting point. He gets that guy's been around gaming for a while, huh? Monty Cook.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah, I
think
guess.
the best thing he ever did was blow the whistle on System Mastery, and then he deleted that post, but you can still find it on the Internet Archive. So yeah,
Okay.
smart dude.
All right. I'm going to take a note because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, look up Ivory Tower game design on the Wayback Machine. It's a really interesting post about why he got out of third edition and never
Hmm.
really looked back.
Very cool.
Whole other topic.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah, what if you're just doing it ironically? What if it's the edgiest edge lord to be an edge lord ever? Is that is that okay? How does that play out in a group? Do you think?
That's hilarious and funny. In my opinion, like you can do it, as long as you keep kind of these other things that we mentioned in mind, right? As a player, like don't be the jerk, don't be the instigator.
Mm,
Don't allow your actions and your choices um, to disrupt, I guess, the rest of the players or even the story, right? Like, to some extent, you have to play along with what the DM's telling you, right? Um, you have to, follow the story, um, at least some, right?
mhm. Yeah, and
So,
that I think
yeah.
works better if you have experience with the game, right? If you know what a normal playthrough of a campaign goes like, you want to play a little bit of a controversial or contrary character, that's easier to do if you've done it before. Like if you're on your second character, you could have made an edgelord and not even know that you've done it.
Hmm. Especially if you really kind of drink the Kool Aid like we tend to do
Hmm.
when we get into the game, and you want to
Well,
make that epic, awesome backstory.
and it's like you
Um,
said, there's a lot of media out there that sort of
mhm.
lends itself to this idea that you should be this kind of lone wolf badass character. Right now, first level characters are not badasses by any means. You could die by somebody slamming a door in your face, um, but still, you kind of want to make that character and write that into your backstory.
Mhm.
So how would you
Right.
know if you'd made an edge lord just accidentally? Like you brought one to the table, you didn't realize. What are some signs do you think somebody might see on
Okay,
an edge lord character?
we can play this game. We'll call this game "You Might Be an Edgelord If." All right. So you might
Okay.
be an edgelord if your parents are dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. If your backstory includes the death of a beloved pet, you might be an edge lord.
Oh, that's tragic. Yeah.
So tragic.
Uh, you might be an edgelord if you wear an eye patch.
Oh, all right. Um, if your
We can go on to
outfit
yeah. Go ahead.
if your outfit has 5 or more buckles, you might be an edge lord.
In both of those cases, parentheses, unless you're actually a pirate.
Right?
All right. You may be an edgelord if you ran out of black ink when you drew your character portrait.
Oh, nice. Good. Yeah. Um, you may be an edgelord if your outfit is so black that people with dark vision can't even see.
I would change that one. You might be an edgelord if you need dark vision to get dressed.
Okay. Yeah. True. True.
All right. All right. So you might be an edgelord if you're a grim, brooding, sarcastic, badass psychopath.
Well, sure. That's
Yeah.
just right there in the dictionary, right?
Yeah.
um, you might be an edge lord if your character sheet contains more than one of the words chaotic neutral, warlock, or rogue.
Very nice. And yeah, I'm gonna bring it back to an '80s song here. You might
Okay.
be an edgelord if you wear your sunglasses at night.
Yeah.
That's Corey Hart. Look it up. Great song.
Great song.
And
Good
that's all I've
times.
got.
Yeah. But seriously, if you've got a backstory that has all of this stuff happening to your character,
Mhm.
and by all rights, a character that had gone through adventures detailing all that stuff would make you level 10. That's first of all a bad backstory because you're starting at level 1. Well, unless you are starting level 10. But you get my point. Like
Mhm.
if you're supposed to be a journeyman and all of this crazy stuff happened to you and deities owe you favors and you've got katanas made from your parents' spines. I saw that one on Reddit today.
Whoa,
Um,
whoa, whoa.
right?
Chill out there. Yeah.
Uh, you know, are you playing the game or are you setting up a character with a backstory? Because I'm just, curious to see where you're going with this character idea.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got that image stuck in my head still.
I know. Like, how do
Man.
you, how do you, I don't know. Like I said, maybe hopefully they were doing it ironically. I don't
Yeah, sure. I'll give you that.
know.
Uh,
So one thing that I could see might actually make this work, and it's a little bit rare, but there is the such thing as a one-on-one game or a solo game. And
mhm.
this, I think, might make the perfect venue for a lone wolf character that doesn't like to talk about his feelings and is a total badass.
Yeah. But then again, that kind of ties back to earlier advice, right? Like, um, that session zero, not necessarily about session itself, but one of the big things that comes out of that, right, is set expectations, right? All players and the DM need to be on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, at least thematically, right? That's not to say that a lot of times we set out to run a very serious, bloody campaign in D&D, and it instantly turns to Monty Python. It
Mm-hmm.
happens, we can't help it as human beings. We're all wired to, you know, go Monty Python sometimes. Um, so yeah,
Well, yeah, and if you're a Monty Python fan, you're familiar with Salad Days. It's one of the goriest things I think I've ever seen. If you've not seen that, look it up right away because, oh my God, it's hilarious.
good stuff. All
So,
right.
once again, we are guestless. And if you're listening to this and could have been a guest, shame on you. The lady is coming with the bell to walk you down the street naked. Shame, shame, shame.
Wow, he's gonna shame people like that, huh?
I'm telling
It's
you,
gonna.
this is the third time we've said, oh, we don't have a guest. I'm done with you. Come be a guest. Just put up or shut up. Let's do this.
All right.
But once again, we have the wonderful internet, so I'm allowed to go through and scrape it for questions.
Mm.
Um, for example, a man named Jared from Facebook says, so starting a new campaign, and one of my players wants to play a character that is basically more of the loner type, doesn't talk much. What can I do to help this relatively new player out?
Mm,
or I think maybe to frame it another way, if you have an edge lord coming to your
Yeah.
table with character concept, what do you do?
Hmm. Yeah, tough question, right? Um, what are the other players into, right? You kind of gave good advice earlier where you said, hey, this might not work with this campaign. Like, what else have you got? What are you thinking? Um, that being said, if someone is dead set on playing this character and they just love this concept, I mean, the man without a name, right? This is every Clint Eastwood was sorry, Clint Eastwood spaghetti western.
Right.
That's a lot of syllables to get out there. Um, yeah, I mean, it can be an interesting character, I guess. Just set those expectations right. Make sure that they're not going to go down some of these you know paths that we mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, some of it's going to come to your level of experience as a DM, right? So,
Hmm.
Tasha's Cauldron of Everything recently came out, caused some consternation online. I don't know if you saw it, but it was kind of everywhere. For me and my table, it's fine. I don't care. We can have more powerful character options. We can have more character variety. It's not going to change the game that much for me. And if it does, I can adapt it on the fly. I'm just not
Hmm.
stressing about it. Same thing with an edge lord character. Like if I had one, I would first again approach with an open hand and say, "Hey, let's talk about this. This is what I have in mind. What do you have in mind?" And see if it fits, and just see if we can agree that this is going to go in a direction and then find out if we like that direction that it goes. But if it didn't happen, or if I just overlooked something and somebody wound up being like a closet edge lord on me or something, I could probably still roll with it. I can come up with ways to pull them into the game. I can manipulate events behind the screen a little bit to make that happen, try and set them up to be the hero, those
Hmm.
kinds of things.
I mean, you can always redeem them. They may hate you for it, but you can
Hey,
work in
you
that
really can.
character arc, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, some of those signals are so strong and the tropes are so deeply embedded in our fiction that
Hmm.
players will just jump right on that train. All you need to do is open the door.
Sure. All right. You want
Okay.
to take a stab at the next question here?
Yeah.
All right. We have Stuart from Facebook. How do you guys deal with a party member who always decides that all they want to do during the game is act like a loner? Not so much edgelord, but also barely more active than a phantom loaf.
Right. So yeah, this
What?
character, they're not trying to be cool about it. They're just also not doing anything. I love these players. And honestly, I think it's one of the strongest compliments you can get if you think
Mhm.
about it as a DM. Like you have basically a fan, right? This person wants to be around your game. They don't necessarily want to interact with it directly. They
Mhm.
do because it's the price of intermission, but they might just come and listen even if they didn't have a character to play. Um,
Sure.
what I like to do is just encourage them to continue to play, keep them in the loop, right?
Mhm.
Deliberately engage their character in a very light way, once every other game at a minimum, right? And just kind of keep them around because that's what they want to be.
You know, that kind of comes back to just read the room, right? And know everyone's expectations. Not everyone gets the same thing, out of D&D, right? Some people just like to, swing swords, fight things all the time. Some people like that role playing, and some people are just kind of passive observers, or what we should officially call from now on. It needs to be in the next DMG, the Phantom Loaf.
The Phantom Loaf. Yep.
I love it.
Yep. You know, not not naming names here, but in a recent recorded adventure, we had a player that maybe wasn't paying quite enough attention to what was going on and killed the wrong NPC. Um, you know,
Wait,
I,
what?
yeah, it happens, and you just roll with it, right? It's just one of those memorable things. I have a
Yeah.
story. A roommate in college used to play a Wookiee in the Star Wars campaign, and it was the typical Han Solo Chewbacca setup, right? But this was
Yeah.
Chewbacca. But Chewbacca used to fall asleep all the time. Like we played in the dorm, so he'd play from his bunk and be like, "No, I'm awake. No, I'm awake," and he wasn't. He was totally asleep. So
Mhm.
we made it a rule: if the Wookiee fell asleep, Or if the player fell asleep, the Wookiee fell asleep, just in game. Just, 800 pounds of
Mm-hmm.
sleeping Wookiee. Deal with it. Um, there was a mission where they came to inspect the hold of this thing, and the smugglers were carrying this plant, and it was a rare thing. If you opened the lid, it immediately grew to full size and bloomed, and then it would die within an hour. So it was one of those things like deliver the plant, don't let anybody open it. It's to be opened by the whoever.
Okay.
So it was illegal as could be. And they got boarded by the Imperials. They're being inspected, and the player is rolling their bluff, their con and stuff. And they're almost done with the inspection, and the inspector turns to that one box and says, "What is that right there? I don't see that on your manifest." The bluffing smuggler player says, "That? Oh, that's just my luggage." And the Wookiee wakes up and says, "Luggage? We live here." Awesome.
Wow. The
Yep.
narcolepsy is a serious problem. It can impact Wookiees as well.
Right? Even Wookiees. Anyway,
Wow.
third one for tonight. Someone named Atlas also saw on Facebook. This one's a little different. I included this one more for what do you do if, but it says, what are
Mm-hmm.
your opinions on players being aware the group doesn't allow evil characters and then intentionally doing evil anyways? Or you could say, what if I said no edge lords, play something else, and they bring an
Mm-hmm.
edge lord anyways?
I mean, you're the storyteller. You want them to have fun, but the simple answer is, you know, actions have consequences, right? Um, that character could very easily get caught doing their evil things.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, if you set up a game world or a proposition that doesn't include these things and they do them anyway, then yeah, they should just bear the brunt of those consequences. It's one of the more natural ways to deal with the problem.
Hmm.
It
I'm actually
can,
running my bi-monthly campaign right now is an evil campaign.
yeah,
Um, when they first mentioned it, that this was something that the players were interested in, I was very nervous. I was expecting a table of, you know, Edgelord murder hobos. And
no,
instead, they're just murder hobos.
just regular old murder hobos. Are they
Yeah.
playing as a team?
They are a team. They're all on the same page. Um, and they're doing great. And like I said, well, the Warlock might be a bit of an edgelord. I don't know.
Yeah.
We haven't really fully explored that character. But
Do you ever get a
yeah.
paper cut when handling the character sheet? That's a good sign too.
That's no. We use D&D Beyond.
Even still,
So,
like if they're sharp enough, it could still happen. I don't know.
yeah. Cut by in the API. It's never happened before.
Cool.
Huh. So, kind of
Yeah.
tie things up in a nice, neat little bow. Um, I will leave you with a quote from Nietzsche.
Mm. Which is
And he
perfectly
said,
ideal for the edgelord topic.
right, Edgelord's very nihilistic. And he said, everything in the world displeases me, but above all, my displeasure in everything displeases me.
Ooh, that's deep.
Yep, total Edgelord stuff. So if
That's
you're going
right.
to make an Edgelord, feel free to use that. It's not my quote. Um,
Well, I think it's a good point because be careful about painting yourself into a corner with any backstory or any character
mhm.
concept, right? If you have framed your characters, the only way to play it in a fun way means that it's not going to fit into the group, and you might be stuck with that. You might wind up having to retire that character, right? You might wind up hating that decision early on. So go easy with it.
Well, then, if you're playing a long campaign, that could get real boring real quick, right? Even as a DM who I like to use players' backstories against them in fun and hilarious ways,
Yeah.
or include their backstories is another way of putting that. Um, if you don't give me anything to work with, you have no ties to the world. Even your parents are dead, and you're using their bones as your samurai swords or your sticks or whatever it was. Um, yeah, like I work with that. I can't help you with that. It's yeah, as a DM, just give me something to work with.
Right. Yeah. Well, very, very well put.
Well, thank you. All right, and I think that's it for this podcast. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, it's a little shorter tonight, but the topic I think is a little more limited, and I think we were able to just sort of drill right into the essence of it. If we
Yeah,
missed anything, please leave us a comment. Jump in the Discord. Tell us how wrong we are. We love that stuff, right? Absolutely, absolutely will not back down from an argument on this or any other topic. And chances are Jerry's going to have your side. So
absolutely. If it's against Bob, I'm with you all the way.
let's do it,
Especially if you're a Patreon member, right?
right?
So yeah, trying to take advantage of that, get more great content. Uh, you can join us on a conversation on Discord, like Bob said, or yeah, come join us on the show. You can find all of our links to all the stuff we're doing: podcasts, videos, DM's Guild content, uh, YouTube videos. Did I say YouTube videos? All on rethinkgaming.com.
Yeah, it's our videos are so nice. You said it twice, and it's all up there on this wonderful website. Um, Remember, guys, think, rethink, play.